A hemispherectomy is a surgical procedure in which half of a person's brain is removed. It's usually only ever done on very, very young patients because their brains are still plastic enough that the remaining half will take on the functions of the half that was removed. And it's usually done because a young child or a baby is having seizures, and removing the part where the seizures occur is the only solution. But here's my question. If you can live with half a brain, what if I were to take two empty skulls and take one half of your brain and plop it into one body, and the other half and put it in another body? Which person would be you? I mean, you are you. You are conscious. You are aware of what is happening to you from the perspective of yourself. Like, think of it this way. If you just stare at something and kind of feel what it feels like to be you, it feels a little bit like you're a thing inside a body looking out through the eyeballs. And nobody else on earth will ever see the world from that position. This awareness of your own experiences, the awareness that you are having them, the awareness that you are having your own thoughts, makes up what we call consciousness. But if I were to take your brain and split it into two and put it into two different people, would both of them be new people who were conscious? Well, one of the best places to start when defining consciousness and understanding it is to begin with things that we agree are not conscious. For instance, Cleverbot. Cleverbot.com is an amazing website where a computer program will respond to your questions really cleverly, but only because it is programmed to do so. We wouldn't consider it conscious because it doesn't have a sense of itself. It doesn't feel anything. It doesn't have its own inner life. It's just a program that responds automatically to my inputs. Now, I know that I am not like Cleverbot. I know that I feel things and that I have a sense of myself. I have intentions. But how do I know that you do? For that matter, how do I know that everybody else that I meet is like me? How do I know that they're not just little smart versions of Cleverbot who know exactly what to automatically say? Now, what I'm asking is incredibly philosophical, but it is a very famous and important question. I'm basically asking if it's possible for something to exist as a philosophical zombie. That's right, a thing that reacts and responds and acts just like a normal human, but yet doesn't actually feel anything. It doesn't know that it's having its own thoughts. It just automatically responds like a robot in the appropriate way. Now, what's amazing and heavy about this question is that science doesn't have an answer. And it's not even clear that science will ever have an answer, let alone an approach to finding that answer. About all we have is the psychology of disorders of consciousness. Let's begin with anosognosia. A common example of anosognosia in psychology classes is a patient who has, say, lost the ability to move their left hand. When asked to raise their right hand, they'll say, yeah, no problem, here you go. But then when asked to raise their left hand, they'll say, okay, yeah, sure, no problem, but not move it. And when asked why they didn't move their left hand, instead of reporting that they can't, they'll confabulate some excuse. For instance, oh, I didn't feel like it. Anton Babinski syndrome is even more dramatic. Patients with this syndrome are cortically blind. They cannot see anything, but they deny being blind. If you ask them a question, for instance, how many fingers am I holding up? They will make a guess, but if they're wrong, they'll explain their inaccuracy with an excuse. For instance, oh, well, I don't have my glasses. People who exhibit anosognosia tend to be the victims of stroke, and there's some disconnect between what they're really experiencing and their conscious awareness of it. They don't know that they can't see because the part of their brain that monitors visual input isn't telling the brain anything. It's not even telling the brain that there is no visual input, which means that the parts of their brain responsible for answering questions or creating speech has to completely create a confabulated response. Despite the fact that we've been able to study patients with anosognosia, we still have no idea how to solve our original problem. In fact, all we've managed to come up with are more impossible questions about identity. Questions that are so befuddling, the best you can do with them is to answer them yourself according to what you believe.
I think a lot of people just assume that the way to make AIs more intelligent is to make them more human. But I think that's a very dubious assumption. I think we're much better off with tools than with colleagues. We can make tools that are smart as the dickens and use them and understand what their limitations are without giving them ulterior motives, purposes, a drive to exist and to compete and to beat the others. Those are features that don't play any crucial role in the competences of artificial intelligence. So, for heaven's sakes, don't bother putting them in. Leave all that out, and what we have is very smart thingies that we can treat like slaves, and it's quite all right to treat them as slaves because they don't have feelings. They're not conscious. You can turn them off, you can tear them apart the same way you can with an automobile. And that's the way we should keep it. So we have all these deep learning systems, and they come in varieties. There's Bayesian networks and reinforcement learning of various sorts, deep learning neural networks. And what these computer systems have in common is that they are competent without comprehension. Google Translate doesn't know what it's talking about when it translates a bit of Turkish into a bit of English. Doesn't have to. It's not as good as the translation that a bilingual can do, but it's good enough for most purposes. And what's happening in many fields in this new wave of AI is the creation of systems, black boxes, where you know that the probability of getting the right answer is very high. They are extremely good. They're better than human beings at churning through the data and coming up with the right answer. But they don't understand how they do it. Nobody understands in detail how they do it, and nobody has to. So we've created entities which are as inscrutable to us as a bird or a mammal considered as a collection of cells is inscrutable. There's still a lot we don't understand about what makes them tick. And we can use these products, these intellectual products, without knowing quite how they're generated, but knowing, having good, responsible reasons for believing that they will generate the truth most of the time. No existing computer system, no matter how good it is at answering questions like Watson on Jeopardy, no such system is conscious today, not close. And although I think it's possible, in principle, to make a conscious android, a conscious robot, I don't think it's desirable. I don't think there would be great benefits to doing this, and there would be some significant harms and dangers too. You could, at tremendous expense, but you'd have to have, in fact, quite a revolution in computer design, which would take you right down to the very base of the hardware.